Welcome to the Donna Seebo Show Special Editions. This program is dedicated to featuring authors and experts from around the world who will share their knowledge and insight with you. The viewing and listening audience, literacy and education are the keys to freedom, and diversity enables one to live in a world with broader perspectives. This is Donna Seebo, and I will be your host for the next hour. Welcome to the Donna Seebo Show, the Donna Seebo television show. Now, I am an international radio talk show host and producer. Also, we've started the television programming where I'm able to bring to you some of the authors that I have featured on my radio programming. This particular show is about alternative methods of healing. And we have a guest, Danny Carroll from Bombay, India. And we also have Dr. Metzger from Bellevue, Washington. And we're going to be talking about chiropractic care. Now, for those of you that are aware of my programming, it's very important, I think, that we become educated about the various aspects that are available to us to ensure our health and our well-being. So I want to welcome you, Dr. Metzger.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
Very
it's
excited.
Yes, and by the way, he is a rock and roll star too. So he does a little bit of unique stuff. And Danny Carroll, I am so pleased that we're able to make the contact with you in Bombay, India, because when I talked to you before, you were here in the United States visiting, but you're a man that travels all over the place. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Donna. Yes, I was in the US the last time we spoke. My wife's an American diplomat, and she's from California. So we were in California last time I spoke, but my permanent residence is Bombay, India, and my second home is in Dublin. So, I travel a lot.
Yes. Wellness is a topic that is important to people around the world. But what we're going to be talking about today, because Danny, you have had such a unique background relative to learning about the mind-body-spirit connection. Dr. Metzger, you're very much aware of that. Both of you have had personal experiences as well as becoming engaged in professional environments that address this. So I'm going to go to you, Danny, in Bombay. I'd love for you to share with my audience how it was that you became aware of a particular doctor in Germany and how that transformed your life. But what did you go through? So many times we have these different experiences, and they lead us from dot to dot to dot, and then finally we find what works for us. What happened with you?
So my journey started in about 2004. I had a friend who was diagnosed with cancer in Bombay. She couldn't afford the treatment, so I funded her treatment and ensured her compliance to treatment, and she died within 3 rounds of chemo. I was devastated at the time, so I swore I would search to the ends of the earth to find a better solution to the problem we call cancer. I spent many years searching, but I didn't really get a breakthrough until 2012. I had a cathartic healing experience. For 6 months, my entire body was riddled with golf ball-sized knots in my calf muscles, my thighs, my arms, my back. And I'm a marathon runner, so at that point in time, I could barely walk. And I was in physio for 6 months, having these knots ironed out of my muscles, which is excruciatingly painful. The physio basically uses their elbows to iron the knots out of your muscles, and it's really, truly excruciating. I had a very interesting challenge at that point. My then girlfriend and now wife, who's an American diplomat, she was leaving Bombay, and the next posting was in Santiago de Chile. So we had agreed that we'd terminate our relationship. But the problem is we'd become soulmates. So the weekend before she was leaving, we sat down on a Friday evening and decided that we would not terminate our relationship because we couldn't. So we were doomed to this ridiculous long-distance relationship between South Asia and South America. And when I woke up on the Saturday morning, the knots that had been in my muscles for the last 6 months, and they were literally huge golf ball-sized knots, magically disappeared overnight. So I woke up on Saturday morning and they'd all gone. This is where I got the insights into the mind-body connection, and I had a suspicion that there could be a similar type of relationship between the mind and cancer, So I planned to do a PhD, and I was looking for a university that had both a medical and a psychology specialization, and I was planning to build a bridge between them. And in the process of looking for that university, I found this German medical doctor who was reported to have a 92% success rate, healing primarily terminally ill cancer patients using a form of mind-body medicine. And I've been studying and testing his medical discoveries for the last 11 years. And they're truly extraordinary. I mean, since then, I've had jaw cancer, testicular cancer. I currently have skin cancer. And I've used this modality in order to be able to heal those cancers. And it's mind-blowing, Donna. It's really, truly extraordinary.
Well, that was one of the reasons when I interviewed you on my radio show, when I had that opportunity. And of course, your book is titled Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis, and you have a subtitle on that book. But what is so fascinating is that this isn't quackery. This is real information, and there's all kinds of tests and points of detail that you give in this book. And it's incredible what you have been able to share. Dr. Metzger, you yourself, and your book is How to Adjust Yourself and Avoid Seeing a Chiropractor.
Giving all my trade secrets away. Put myself out of business.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But chiropractors have had, there's such a grouping of myths regarding chiropractic health. Now, your book is one where you want people to know, number one, there is a history regarding the chiropractic situation, and number two, that you wish that it could be incorporated in a much more comfortable way than it is. So tell us what it was that got you into it, because you've been in different medical environments.
That's right. Yeah, my journey started back, I knew I wanted to be a healer and a doctor, so I started my pre-med down in Houston, accepted to Baylor Medical School, worked at the hospital for 3 years, and just worked my way up in the hospital, ran nurses' stations, the doctors, oh, you're gonna be a doctor, yeah, come on, do some rounds with me, come on. And, so they really took me under their wing. And I went from oncology to spinal cord injury to ICU to emergency rooms, all that kind of stuff. And I'm just trying to find my niche where I'm gonna do this, and I couldn't find it. So I had a couple experiences prior to that where I used to suffer from migraines. And so just a couple years before I started my pre-med, I was just at a dinner party, and there was this migraine came over me, and I couldn't even hold my head up, and I was just falling into my plate of food, literally. And the guy was like, is there something I can help you with? And I'm a chiropractor, and I don't know what that is, but whatever you want to do, can you get rid of my headache? He laid me on the floor, and a couple of pops later, my headache was gone instantly. And I couldn't believe that just something like that, instead of pounding, 5 or 6 or 7 extra strength Excedrin all the time, and then turn the lights and the fish tank off and hide in the corner, that's all it took to get rid of my migraines. And I haven't had them since. So that kind of stuck in the back of my mind, and I ended up working for a chiropractor, finding that the hospital situation really wasn't working for me. I couldn't find my niche, so I went outside into private practice. None of the medical doctors would hire me in their private practice because I didn't have blood draw experience. And so I ended up working for a chiropractor, just doing exams and x-rays on all the new patients that were coming in, and then 30 days later, just do another re-exam and then go over their findings with them. And after 30 days and more, and 30, 60, 90 days, everybody that came through there was happy and healthier and positive. And I didn't even tell her about this, and that's gone. And it was just the most amazing healing experience. And just an observation from a research eye looking at something like that. I'm like, this is crazy. I want to be a chiropractor instead. So I withdrew from Baylor Medical, and I went to Life Chiropractic College West. I did take 12 different techniques in chiropractic to try to study, how to work and manage the body manually, but that wasn't enough for me either. So when I got to Seattle, I took 2 more years in sports chiropractic. I went to massage school, I went to yoga school, I took a couple of degrees in personal training as well. I did Feldenkrais, Rolfing training, and flexology training, all just to try to really figure out what makes this body work tick manually. Because there's basically, just like the dental industry, you've got dentists that do the toothache, and you got dentists that do the braces. I'm the guy, you got chiropractors that do the pain management, and you got chiropractors that do structural correction like braces on teeth. I'm that guy. I wanted to learn how to mold and get the curves out of the body and correct the body, because structure is everything. And Thomas Edison said it best, you know, the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but he'll instruct the patient in the care of the human frame. And so I really have stuck with that protocol in trying to get the structure of the body cleared and healthy first, whether it's the bone system, the muscle system, the ligament system. Get it lined up, get it functioning properly, because that takes the pressure off the nerve system. And as you know, that's the controlling system that works everything, including chemical balances that determine whether or not you're making tumor cells, all that kind of stuff. You've got to have a correct working immune system and nerve system properly in order to be healthy.
I agree with that, and I don't know about any of my audience, but I will tell you, I can remember my first experience with a chiropractor, and I gave up on them very, very quickly, because by the time they got through popping me, I thought, I don't know if I'm going to survive this or not. And it didn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
It didn't do anything for me. So I think we've come a long way to realizing that all of these modalities that you mentioned, they're alternative modalities, but they make a difference. Now, Danny, with the doctor that you became aware of, his history was fascinating to me, because this is a man who was a researcher and had documented, he treated thousands of people in his time as being a physician. His success rate went anywhere from 85% up to 98% with his patients. Now, when you have numbers like that, that should not in any way be a negative. You'd think that the environment of the medical community would be jumping up and down and saying, my goodness, we spend billions of dollars on cancer research, on all kinds of things, and you have found out about this? But here in the United States, I don't think anybody knows about him.
Yeah, well, he estimated, Donna, that when his medical discoveries are allowed to surface, that 95% of all symptomatic treatments would go out of business, right? So the problem is that he's a very dangerous man to the medical community. I mean, his initial discovery came through his own experience, right? So he was a traditionally trained medical doctor. In fact, he was Germany's youngest doctor to ever qualify to practice medicine. In the late 1970s, he went for a very tragic experience where his 19-year-old son was shot and murdered. And 2 months later, he got testicular cancer with metastasis to the stomach. Now, according to conventional medicine, this just sort of falls out of the sky, but he couldn't help thinking there must be a causal link between his son getting murdered and him getting cancer on a reproductive organ, because otherwise he was in his late 40s and he was a healthy guy, and all of a sudden his son dies, and then he gets a fast-growing tumor on his testicle. And fast forward, working with over 50,000 cancer patients directly, what he discovered is that the tumor on his testicle was actually functional tissue, and it had a biological purpose. Okay, so his son was murdered. 2 months later, he got a fast-growing tumor on his testicle, and what he learned is that that tumor was actually designed to increase his testosterone and sperm production, so that he had a better chance of getting his wife pregnant to replace the child he just lost. So after working on for 39 years with over 50,000 cancer patients, what he basically concluded, Donna, is that cancer is a survival biological program, and that nature, in fact, never goes wrong. And that when we get cancer, so it's when we face headwinds, a life crisis, an emotional trauma, what life does is it increases our capacity in order to help us solve the problem. And in his case, he got a tumor on his testicle in order to give him a better capacity to get his wife pregnant, to replace a child he just lost. And when you understand that fundamental connection, and you start putting what he discovered is that every change in our biology, whether it's a runny nose, a sore throat, a cancer, an IBS, any Parkinson's disease, they're all part of a survival biological program. And when you understand how they work, it just all makes sense, and it's quite extraordinary.
One of the points that you bring out in the book, which I can tell you, having interviewed so many people, I've crossed paths with thousands through my years of my work. And today, the most common statement that is made is that doctors today don't talk to their patients. They don't know what's going on in that patient's life. Now, this doctor, he did have a son that died a horrible way,
yes.
And that traumatized him. So his body chemistry went what we call wacko over that. I know from personal experience how emotions can create health conditions. I have seen that with so many people through the years. And our bodies, all of our cells are extremely intelligent. And in recent research, at least here in the United States, and I think even in different places around the world, they're acknowledging, for example, with breast cancer, with women, they'll say, and with a few men, but it's more with women, that there usually is some kind of deep emotional trauma that they have gone through, but nobody ever takes the time. When you go in to see a doctor anymore, you're lucky if you have 10 minutes. You don't have the time. And it's not just in the United States, it's overseas as well. And you've got all of this mentality of, well, you've got to see 60 patients a day, otherwise you can't be part of the team. You've got all of this that's going on. This is so frustrating for physicians because many times they will know that there is something that's going on here. But if you can't sit and have a conversation with your patient, how in the world are you going to know what's going on with them? You're not. You can't. It's not possible. So with this wonderful, wonderful doctor that you speak of so highly in your book, what is his name?
Dr. Richard Geert Hummer. He was the youngest doctor to ever qualify to practice medicine in Germany, possibly the greatest medical mind ever put on this earth. I mean, he unraveled the biological code. I mean, if you take your example of breast cancer, okay, now if you take mammary gland breast cancer, if you look at the biological purpose of a mammary gland, basically it's to lactate. Okay, now a woman only lactates when basically she's pregnant and she's nursing after giving birth. As soon as she stops breastfeeding, then the mammary glands will dry up. So, but if you look at the breast is a nurturing piece of equipment. So what happens to that is that, let's say we take an example that a woman's walking along the road and a child pulls away from her, runs in the road and gets hit by a car, okay, and ends up in ICU. That trauma of the child getting hit by the car and becoming sick, what it basically does is that accident hits the brain, and the brain says, okay, crisis, we've got a sick child. We need to turn back on the lactation ability. So the brain then sends a signal to the breast to say, okay, turn back on lactation. So as soon as that child gets hit by a car, the woman will start to feel a lump in her breast, and that is basically nature reactivating her ability to lactate so that she can breastfeed the child. Before our modern day society, the breast was the only instrument she had in order to be able to nurse a sick family member. Okay, so as soon as the child gets hit by the car, it hits the brain, and the brain says, okay, we need some milk, turn the milk back on. And then the idea of that biologically is that she can breastfeed the child and get the child healthy again. And once the child is healthy again, then that program will automatically switch off. Okay, so breast cancer of the mammary gland is caused by something that Dr. Hummer called a nest or a care conflict. So it's a problem within your family or within your nest. You have a fight with you have a problem with your children or your partner or your husband or your dog, and those conflicts basically are what trigger the mammary glands to get reactivated, which is why breast cancer is the most common cancer in women.
Fascinating. Dr. Metzger, as a chiropractor, you're nodding as we're talking about the emotional side. You know from personal experience how the emotions and various challenges that people can go through in their life experience, because you've had your fair share, like all of us end up having.
For sure.
And it really is a very significant part of your working with people, isn't it? Finding out what's going on with them.
Yeah, for sure. So you got to understand what controls your attitude, your emotions, and your behavior. It's all controlled by the chemical reactions within the body. And what controls the chemical reactions within your body? It's your nerve system. So again, I go back to the root cause, that you can't have any pressure anywhere on your nerve system. And the most common place where you get pressure on the nerve system is through bones that shift a little too far, too much sometimes. You know, the average teenager at up to 19 years old has suffered 3,000 falls, 5,000 if you play sports. And those are all untreated personal injury types of cases, almost like a car wreck kinds of accidents that tear muscles and ligaments and reposition bones and alignment. And there's no treatment for it. They go untreated all the way through the teens until they sit there and fester and create imbalances and compensate. And then eventually these pain syndromes start to come out in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. And then we're like, oh my gosh, what do I do about this? And then you start seeking some type of manual care and treatment for that. So you talk about the body going through possibly 30 some odd years of trauma and disabilities before you actually start treating that. How much pressure is on the nerve system? on most people out there. There's less than 10% of the population that utilizes any kind of manual manipulative therapies in order to remove pressure off the nerve system. And so you're going to have that compromise going on with all of us. Emotionally, we're going to be drained. We're going to be tired. We're going to be fatigued. You know, you'd work a real strong work week, you'd drive really long in your car. Those things are going to bring out those symptoms a lot more and a lot more frequently to let you know there's a problem in there. It affects your attitude, your behavior, you know, and then we're all running around there with compressed nerve systems. And look what happens. You know, you got officers carrying guns, you know, that can't make healthy decisions sometimes. And you got people, you know, just tired of societal things, and they take things into their own hands that are making poor decisions in their life because their nerve systems are whacked.
And that's very true. One of the things that I really enjoyed about your book, I love the pictures of your daughter that are in there. And from the time she was born, you were very attentive to paying attention to her physical well-being because of your background and your experience. Yeah. And you have a photo of her when she was just a little thing, and you're holding her like this under her arms, and your thumbs are in a certain positioning.
That's right.
So what were you doing?
So basically, anytime you pick up a child, it's a great opportunity to touch, feel, compress, mobilize, and just kind of test and see if there's any locking that happens early on in the body. The 50% of the population fall on their head the first year of life. Were you one of them?
No, I don't know. My brother hit me in the head with a hammer.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't remember
And you don't
anything
know
else.
if you're one of them because, you know, most of the time it was under the babysitter's control, and they're not going to tell you what happened, right?
Oh,
yeah. So you start rolling, you roll off the bed, bam, you receive neck trauma. You know, from half of us in the world, you know, have that. So yeah, it's very important to start young. It's so easy to correct the restrictions that happen within the spine as a child. Clear those out. I remember playing in the backyard, you know, with my little cars in a mud pit next to the tree, and, you know, and my back was hurting, and I'd run into my mom, and I'm like, Mom, can you, like, pop my back or something? And she was like, yeah, lay down. And so I'd lay on the floor, and she would just, you know, gently pop, 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 pop up, and I would be like, oh, perfect. Thanks. And I'd run back outside and I'd play for another few hours. No back pain at all, instantly taken care of. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we training our families to be our chiropractors, to work with the body and teach us? So that's why my book is so important. How to adjust yourself and avoid seeing a chiropractor. You can teach very easily. We got to touch more. You know, and you look at it's such an untapped energy for healing energy in our society. The most number one healing art in the world. Do you know what it is? The first, highest, best priority healing art in the world. Do you know what it is?
No.
Thought.
That's a good point.
If you think about something, you can actually create action and do something about it. So if you think about healing and healing thoughts for yourself or healing thoughts for somebody else, it's the most powerful thing that we have is thought. You can move mountains with thought, we're taught.
That's true.
Okay, so the second most powerful healing art in the world that's underutilized is speech. And so if you combine thought with speech, and now you can do things with healing by talking, praying, and if you put those combinations in there, they've even done studies in the Journal of American Medical Association on prayer. And if a doctor will pray over his patient, they'll get better 10%. You can measure it, 10% better than the average patient if the doctor just prays over his patient. And then the third most powerful healing art that should be utilized in our world that is not is touch. We got to touch more. We don't get touched. Like you said, and when you go in to see the doctor, they're going to like talk to you for a few minutes, write you a script, say, here you go. All right, and then so where's that going to get you? Nobody's touching anybody. We got to bring back touch. And there's so many people that just don't receive healing touches through life. You know, we're perpetrated. You know, we're smacked around. We're abused. We all have poor touching skills as we were growing up. A lot of us never grew up in a really nice, nurturing sort of family where touch was so important. But now when you take that touch and you start to put it into the body, it goes back. As far as literature is concerned, you can track it all the way back 4,300 years ago
Very
to the
true.
Egyptians and the Yellow Emperor. And they have documented cases about touching and walking on backs and things like that, and massage. And we know Hippocrates was using manual manipulation. The father of medicine was touching back then. So we know that they utilize these therapies. It's only until like the last 100 years where we've kind of taken, chiropractic has kind of taken it and studied it more than medicine. And we've been able to take that and go, you know what? You should probably step on the right side of the body right here, not on the left side. And so we've been able to fine tune it to that precise of a technique now. But if we start touching more, you use a combination of thinking, speaking, praying, verbalizing your health, you're gonna get healthy, positive affirmations, as well as manual manipulations and clarity of the system. You've got a fighting chance to handle any type of cancerous situation that's going on with your body, whether you're trying to maintain some sort of balance or homeostasis. You got a better fighting chance with that than not.
Oh, I agree. Danny, that is something in your work. You have been so dedicated to working with the doctor's system, and you have documented so many cases yourself. And this has actually become your life's work, because just what Dr. Metzger was saying, Danny, you are yourself. You wouldn't disagree with any of it, because you know that mind-body-spirit connection is so vital. And it's difficult, I think, for many people in the medical field to really understand that vitality, but yet we are having doctors that are leaving their practices because the associations that they are with, they say, if I'm going to have a private practice, I will have a private practice. I'm not going to be part of the system anymore. They're walking away by scores, and it's not just doctors, it's nurses. And I agree with what you're saying, don't touch. There was a story that I was made aware of just in this last week, and it was about a mother after delivering her baby. She found out that half of her son's body was paralyzed from the trauma of birth. And she was in Europe, it was a European woman, and she massaged, her mother had been a nurse. She massaged that baby all the time, and when it would cry during the night, the bassinet was right by the side of the bed. She'd reach over, she'd massage the child, and she would talk to the child. He ended up being, it was a little boy, perfectly healthy. Everything ended up coming back, and the doctors had told her, your child's going to be paralyzed for the rest of his life. There's just nothing we can do. But she did something differently. She said, no, I can do this. And I've heard so many cases like this, where someone will make up their mind, and whether it is a mother or a father with a child, or whether it is the individual themselves. Just like you, Danny, you just said, all right, there's something going on here that I need to know. And what's one of the most significant individual cases, I would say, that you have worked with, Danny, that comes to your mind that you'd like to share with my audience, so that they know that this is not something that's hokey pokey. This is real. Both of you gentlemen are expressing that very well.
Yeah, so Dr. Metzger is correct. Yeah, I mean the power of thought and voice are the most powerful instruments we have. What this German doctor, Dr. Hummer, basically discovered is the life cause of every single disease on Earth, right? So when you understand the cause of a problem, it makes it easy to solve. So I'll give you my own personal experience of the first time I used this modality, right? So it was 2015. I was on my way to do my training in Toronto for this modality. I'd gone to London, and my new partner came and met my family in London. We had a big party in London, and within the first day of being there, Donna, I had the most crippling stomach cramps and loose motions I've ever had in my life, right? So, and I had this for 72 hours. I was literally like passing out on the toilet with the pain of stomach cramps, okay? So my then girlfriend said to me, come on, Danny, let's see if we can use this new medical knowledge that you've been learning, see if we can use it to solve this problem. And I said, well, we can try. I've not even done my practitioner's course yet. I was on the way to Toronto to complete my practitioner's course. So she said, okay, what is the conflict that causes pain in the stomach? And I said, it's either it's indigestible anger or it's territorial anger. And she said, when does the pain start? And I said, the pain actually starts when you solve the problem. And she said, what problem have we solved by coming to England? And I said, honestly, I have no idea. My family we had a big party in the garden. There was no problem solving or anything, right? So to give you some background, I left my ex-wife and I split up in 2011. My ex-wife and my family used to fight. She hated them, they hated her, and it was a very difficult relationship to manage. And my new partner, my family loved her, right? So I was laying on my parents' bed and I was folded over in half, crippled with stomach cramps, and I said to my girlfriend, I think I've discovered what problem we've solved. And she said, what is that? And I said, I think we've solved the problem that my partner fights with my family. And I kid you not, Donna, I was laying on the bed, and 1 minute I was crippled with stomach cramps, and I had been for 72 hours. And I'm laying there, and all of a sudden my stomach went diggly, and the pain just disappeared. And I said to my girlfriend, the pain's gone. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I don't know. The pain, my stomach just went diggly, and the pain just disappeared. Okay? She said, that's mad. I'm like, I told you I got no idea what I'm doing. And I laid on the bed and we waited for an hour, it didn't come back. We waited 2 hours, it didn't come back. We waited for 1 day, 2 days, and it never came back, right? I switched. What this German doctor discovered, Donna, is that when you consciously connect the cause of a problem with the symptom of a problem, basically it triggers a spontaneous and cathartic healing process, and it switches off pain like a light switch. And the advice I give people who come to me for help is that you should never believe what anybody tells you until you have personal experience. So trying to explain spontaneous and cathartic healing is almost impossible until you've experienced it for yourself. But when you experience it for yourself, it's extraordinary. So, I mean, what I suggest to people is to look at this with an open mind, study it with an open mind, stay cynical. Don't believe anything until you experience it for yourself, but when you do, it is truly mind-blowing.
When you started really getting into this and you started working with people, it must have been really fascinating to observe all of the different reactions that you would have from individuals and that they found that when they could get to the cause. So because of what you're doing and what you're doing, Dr. Metzger, and I've met a number of other medical professionals, they're taking a stand saying they want to be able to get to know their patients. It's sort of like the old country doctor that knew everybody in town and would say, oh, well, that's it. And I remember seeing an old movie where that very point was brought upon this physician in this small town, and he was handing out pills to this woman. And she was just a nervous wreck. She was just a nervous wreck. And they said, well, gee, you're just giving her all these pills. And in private, he said, don't worry about it. It's sugar. This woman is a nervous wreck. So the pills, psychologically, we give her the sugar. She feels wonderful. And that's all it is. She could have had a teaspoon of sugar in her tea or her coffee, and it would have worked just as well. But that was a movie that was made, gee whiz, had to have been back in the 40s or 30s. You know, it was one of these old movies. And I thought, this is something that medicine has forgotten. That personal interaction, no matter what the age is. And it's the same thing with a child. You take a child, and you're with a child, you have to be patient with them.
Well, the home visits.
Yeah,
they used to do home visits all the time, and nobody does that anymore.
Not
You know how much you learn when you're in somebody's room, in their living room, and you can see the kitchen and the bedroom and how well it's kept, and if things are dirty or clean or kept or not. Or there's so much information you get from that just by being able to visit their home.
Yes,
It's lost art.
And finding out, is dad out of work? Has mom lost her job? You know, has someone been sick? Also, there's genetic patternings often of people. When you find out, you know, is this something that goes on in the family? We try to make everything black and white and fit it into a little capsule and say, take this 3 times a day and everything's going to be super colossal wonderful. And it's not working. It's not working. Here in the United States, we are so low on the totem pole of health.
Horrible.
It is not even funny.
Horrible.
And yet we have all of these different options. But I talk with friends, and when I go in, let's say for a physical, it's something that, gee whiz, you're lucky. They don't check your eyes, they don't check your ears, they don't do much of anything. And it's, how are you feeling? Well, I'm feeling fine, great. And then how many vitamins are you taking? And that's it. I mean, you just 15 minutes and you're out. And you're out. And
if you're lucky,
just giving medicine is not doing the job. It isn't doing the job. So Danny, one of the things, and I know that you have done so much, but the brain CT scan,
Yes.
Dr. Hummer, I want you to talk about that because that to me was phenomenal that he could actually give a diagnosis of someone by reading their brain CT scans, and physicians could not believe that he could do that. And he told them why. How did they do that?
So the brain CT was only actually developed and brought into medicine, I think, in the late 70s, early 80s. Dr. Hummer discovered that our entire life history is printed on our brains, and you could give Dr. Hummer a brain CT scan, and he could tell you your entire life story just from a brain CT scan. Okay, so I'll give you one example of mine. I had a terminally ill patient, a 74-year-old man. He'd been diagnosed with biopsy-proven lung cancer of the alveoli. And he'd also lost his voice. Okay, so I got his brain CT scan done, and when I checked it, there was zero activity on the alveoli. So the diagnosis of the medical doctors, even though it was biopsy proven, basically was incorrect. Okay, now when I checked the brain relay for his bronchi, basically the problem was in his bronchi and not in his alveoli. Now, according to Dr. Hummer, that problem is caused that the alveoli is affected by what Dr. Hummer described as a death-fright conflict, okay? But the bronchi is triggered by something called a territorial fear conflict. So this old man had lost his voice. He was with his son, okay? So I said to the son, what's happened to this man? His bronchi's been affected. He's got a territorial fear conflict. So I did interviews with the family, and what we discovered, Donna, is that he was living with his son, his daughter-in-law, and his grandson was his blue-eyed boy, right? So the daughter-in-law came home from work one day in a bad mood, and she slapped the young grandson around the head and sent him off to his bedroom. Now, the old man saw this, and he was mortified, and he thought it was horribly unjust. Okay, now this man had been sent home to die with alveoli lung cancer, terminal, nothing could be done. Okay, I got the family together. The daughter-in-law sat down and she apologized to the grandfather when she understood what caused the problem. She apologized to her son and said, I'm really sorry, it shouldn't have happened and it will never happen again. And within a month, the old man's lungs had fully healed, his voice had come back again, and he was back in full health again.
Yeah,
and that was all from a brain CT scan, right? When I saw the brain CT scan, I realized that the medical diagnosis was incorrect. They said that the cancer was in the alveoli of the lung. The brain CT, it shows you everything. You can see your entire life history on a brain CT scan. Okay, so when I read the brain CT scan, there was nothing on the alveoli, zero activity. And then when I checked the bronchi, I realized the problem was in the bronchi, which is a completely different problem. And then I solved that problem, and he fully recovered his health.
That's just so fascinating. Dr. Metzger, as a chiropractor, you have really had some adventures. When I read in your book about you're working on snakes, on all kinds of critters, I said, okay, we've got to find out what put you in that. You worked with Barnum and Bailey, didn't you?
I was the chiropractor for the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus, and for the Shriners Circus as well.
Shriners as well, oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I got to adjust all of the animals. I took that training in initial chiropractic school. So, you know, and I just, you know, I've adjusted everything from elephants to black panthers to the show horses that get jumped on, you know, by the acrobats, and they need work. I've done the race horses at Emerald Downs. I do the mounted horses for the Seattle Police Department and the bomb squad dogs as well. They all have spines, you know, and they can all get misaligned and get bounced on as well. So keeping them mobilized, keeping them massaged or chiro if they need it, it's a healthier animal. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I know with horses, I've talked to many people that definitely work with chiropractors on their horses to enable them to stay healthy. And again, with animals, you're dealing with an emotional situation. They go through a trauma, an accident, what have you.
Yeah, well, I had a patient that, you know, their little dog, pet dog, jumped out of their two-story building, and two-story house, and got paralyzed. And so they took it to the vet, and the vet just said, we can't do anything for him. After all, they taped him all up, and I was like, bring him into me, let me check it out. So I got him on the table, and sure enough, you know, his pelvis and his lower back was just all contorted. And so I'm like, I'm gonna adjust this. And I just, bop, you know, and it just, yipe, 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 and down the hall he ran on all four legs. I'm like, get that tape off that dog. You know, I've had the son of VeggieTales, who created VeggieTales. He went to played football with my son, and he came into the clinic one day, and his arm was all cranked up like this and stuck, you know, contorted. And I'm like, what happened to your arm? Well, you're born that way? And he's like, no, just in the last couple of years, it kind of just curled up. And I'm like, that's a pinched nerve in your neck. And like, no, they're going to do surgery on it next month. I'm scheduled for surgery. And they're going to reattach the muscles and the ligaments and around there. And I'm like, no. You're 17. Go get your dad. He brought his dad in, and we had 5 of my staff there. We took pictures before and after. One adjustment on C7 on his neck, and his arm just went boom, instantly, and dropped open and started working. He's like, oh my gosh, I can move my hand. And it was just miraculous. You know, pinched nerves cause so much damage to the body. And, you know, nerves, they either fire or they don't fire. And if they fire, sometimes they slow fire when they get pinched, or sometimes they hyperfire when they get pinched. And so that's why you get diagnoses of hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism and things like that, because tissues are overfunctioning too much. And if you take the pressure off of that, it gives the body a chance to regulate the nerve system freely and get it back in sync of homeostasis.
Boy, that is so very, very important. Danny, with Dr. Hammer, one of the things that you talk about in your book is legal things that he had to go through. And the courts eventually just totally said, this is a waste of time. There's nothing wrong. This man has done absolutely nothing wrong. And when you think of Dr. Hammer's research, you are going forward, you are wanting to really make sure that people understand that they can use this, and you've done so much training, you've done your own record keeping. When you look at this, are you primarily doing this in Europe, or are you also, what are you doing to let people know that they can be trained in the modalities and understand whether they're a lay person or they're a professional? If they're a medical professional, this information is such a wonderful addition to anything they may already have. It's going to empower anyone in whatever aspect of the medical environment they're in, because we're always going to have sick people. We're always going to have people that are going to have accidents. There's no way we're going to get away from that. That's life. Life happens.
Right.
So it's understanding the mind, body, spirit, emotion, connection, and that it's a total package. So when we evolve into that, which I think that a lot of people are evolving into that, I forget how many billions of dollars Americans are spending on alternative treatments rather than following what's considered the protocols of whatever, and they'll go, no, I don't want to do it. There are so many people that are even refusing a lot of the treatments that are recommended for cancer, and that is one of the things that you will cover in your book. But there's all of this. How do you, I know through our conversation we're going to be reaching people, but how can someone find out about this? They have access to your book, but I know that you're very much involved in teaching and training, as I know Dr. Metzger is too. So how do people get to know what it is that you do?
So the challenge here, honestly, Donna, is the fact, I mean, I've spent 11 years studying Dr. Hammer's medical discoveries, and it currently takes considerable applied mind over a long period of time in order to really understand his medical discoveries, which most people are just not going to do. It doesn't make them accessible. Okay, so this book is on Amazon, Terminal Cancers and Misdiagnosis. This is an introduction to these medical discoveries, okay? But what we basically need, which is what I'm in the process of creating, is writing one book on each disease, right? So this is my book on breast cancer. This is my book on dermatitis. This is my book on testicular cancer, and I've got one on IBS. I'm writing 500 of these, right? Because when you have one problem, right? When you have one problem, it's an IBS, it's an eczema, it's a Parkinson's, or it's a cancer issue. You don't want to spend years and years and years basically studying medical discoveries to solve the problem. You want to pick up a small book, right? A small book that's like this thin, it's like a little Reader's Digest. It'd take you an hour to read. And I mean, there's going to be 500 plus of these. And what I'm doing, Donna, is I'm creating a collaborative book writing community in order to get lots of book editors, book writers, book reviewers all together so that we can write these 500 books so that we can make them accessible to the world, right? I mean, nobody's going to spend 11 years studying these. So we've got to write the books, and then all of these books are being written under what's called a Creative Commons license, so that anybody can take this information and build their own author brand and market them to their own community. Okay, so the plan is to both write the books and market the books, that we bring a small army of people from all over the world who can both help to write the books and then market them in their local micro communities. And if we have 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people that build their own author brand and use these books to market them in their local communities, we can spread these discoveries out around the world with significantly greater speed than we ever will be if this guy Danny sitting in Bombay just tried to do it all on his own. So what I'm doing is I'm building the tech out for that now on my website, which is my name, danny-carroll.com. And hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be beta testing that and inviting people to come in and contribute to both writing and marketing those books. And everybody can build their own author brand marketing them, and then we can spread it out globally.
I think education, and that's one of the reasons that I really enjoy doing my programming, whether it's this television show or it is any of my radio shows, is being able to educate people and let them know that there are these options. And it's not just one. To say, gee, there's only one way to do something, that's a mistake. That's a mistake because everybody's very different and we all have our priorities and we live in different cultural environments. There's just so much that we need to make okay that we can learn about so that we can be healthier. And we don't need to go see the doctor as often. That's right. You know, you hear these stories. I love the stories like of a woman that's 95, 98 years of age, and they ask her, what's made you live so long? She said, a sip of scotch, you know, at dinner. And
or a bowl of ice cream.
Yeah, a bowl of ice cream, you know, everything that we say, no, you're not supposed to have any of that. But the truth is, usually you find with those people that have long, long lives. I've been amazed at the veterans that I have interviewed that have been in their 90s. And it is social interaction. It is having a purpose. They're active with something. There's this attitude about life, and they will pay attention to what works right for them. You know, they're not going by somebody else's dictates necessarily. And who knows, maybe for some, a shot of whiskey keeps them pickled and they can live to be 116. I don't know. But it's so amazing, you know, when we talk about things like this, because these basics are important. And you know, Dr. Metzger, when I think of chiropractic and the exercises you were describing, I think of the exercises like Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga. All of those components come from the Eastern culture. Now, they took thousands of years to be able to develop the understanding of the body. And look at how long it has taken for the Western world to make it okay to integrate what that Western or Eastern wisdom is. And Western medicine has a fabulous positioning. I mean, there's so many wonderful things we've discovered. But we have isolated so much because it seems like we threw the baby out with the bathwater when antibiotics came in. And the historical information that we have been able to acquire and what we're able to do, it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. Now, Dr. Metzger, you are a person that's done something that's a little bit different, and that is you're mobile. And I think that is really significant.
Yeah, so I've always been backstage at these shows, these concerts that come through town, you know, and I'm a musician as well. And so I had a connection with, Scorpions would come to town and I'd be like, I wonder if I can adjust them. So I would just grab my portable table and I'd just go knock on the door and I'm like, hey, anybody need a chiropractor? And they'd be like, no, you're not credentialed, get out of here. And I'm like, darn, you know, and then that happened. I got 100 no's, but I got 600 yeses. I just kept at it and just kept showing up. And so I always had that mobile component, being available to concerts that are coming in through town and that sort of thing, being mobile in that aspect. You know, animals going to the farms and where they are at is necessary. They can't always bring the horse to you, to your clinic and things like that too. So I just always had that mobile component to my practice. I have done the brick and mortar, you know, I've done the 300 people a week kind of thing. And it's just, you know, but I always have to have that mobile side too, to make ourselves, you know, available to those that have the need.
Well, and I would think especially if you had elderly patients and they don't, you know, have as much opportunity to get out, and you're able to go right where they are. That really
I
makes a
also
difference.
notice it's so much easier for people too to be introduced to a different new healing art. When I show up at even a nursing home or a gym and I set my table out there and I just work on 1 or 2 people, everyone's like, what's going on over there? Hey, can you like check my knee or my shoulder? Can you like, yeah, come on. Just and the next thing you know it, I got a line 10 people deep because, you know, it's accessible. We don't make healthcare accessible. We make these huge fees to get in that front door for that first time. Oh, we got to do a 45-minute exam. We got to do x-rays. We've got to do all of this other testing. Insurance will pay for testing, right? So we're going to do all the testing we can because they pay for it. It still doesn't give you much information out of it, but nonetheless, you know, hands-on is what you need and you can just move forward and go. But with that big chunk of money in the very beginning, shies everybody away. Huge deductibles in insurance companies now, and you've got to pay for it up front before you come in anyway, is just another deterrent where people are just like, you know, most guys in America, I don't want to see any doctor. Right? They just, I'm going to buck it up and I'm just going to stick with what I got. And, you know, my body will be fine. I'll be fine. Right? And we're used to that kind of healthcare, especially as kids. You know, you take that first fall and what's our first level of healthcare? Buck it up. Get up. You're going to be fine. Stop crying. You're okay. Come on. That's our level of healthcare. It's horrible. We should be taking that kid to a professional. Or you should be working on that kid yourself at home just to kind of check it and see. And if you find something that you're not really sure because you're common and familiar with their body because you have touched them and worked on them a lot and you feel something that's just a little something different, then go take them to a professional. That's where we come in.
I think that it's so important what both of you have shared. There is just so much that is going on that I think is amazing. Now, one of the aspects, Danny, that I think is very, very significant, and I started to bring it up earlier, and it was about the legal process. Dr. Hummer really went through so many challenges with that, even though he had not violated any laws. Now, the litigious societies that we have today. I heard a comment on a radio show just a few days ago saying, well, anything goes when it comes to doing lawsuits. You can even sue over lemonade. And I heard that and I went, excuse me, lemonade? Really?
Yeah.
And I heard what was being discussed. And I thought, this should never even be looked at. But this is what we're in today. This is what we've got.
Terrible.
What's your feedback on that, Danny? Because there are so many people that are so frightened. They don't want to, they say, I don't want to break the law. I don't want to do this. I even had a doctor say to me that she could not read, because I have all kinds of people that I interview on my daily radio show. And I had some information on nutrition, some new information that had come out, scientific research, all kinds of stuff in the books. She said, I can't read that. If I do, I will lose my medical license. Now, to me, that's ludicrous. Are we getting to a point that we're not supposed to read, we're not supposed to think, and that we are going to be put in jail if we do read something that's not approved by the American Medical Association or the powers that be in any way? Seriously? Well,
We've
it's
been
not
there
a
a long
joke.
time, Donna. I mean, Dr. Hummer had his medical license taken away in 1986. He was subsequently prosecuted on multiple occasions for practicing medicine without a license. Okay, he was put in prison for 2.5 years. He had 12 attempts on his life, and they, over a 30-year period, they tried to put him in a mental institution 75 times.
Holy Moses.
Okay, 75 times over the course of his lifetime. And these essentially were my reading of the situation was to keep him busy, right, so that he didn't have the space in order to be able to share and populate his medical discoveries. But I mean, if you take a bigger look at this, Donna, I mean, if you go back in history, you'll find many cases like this. I mean, there was a case in the 1900s of a medical doctor who was a surgeon, and he came up with the insane idea that if you washed your hands before you went into surgery, then you'd get a lower infection and a better survival rate. And he proved it with the numbers. And apparently he was thrown into a mental institution for suggesting something so absurd as it's ideal to clean your hands before you go into surgery. So, I mean, these things have always happened in history. Nobody likes change, and certainly nobody likes cathartic change, right? And the medical discoveries that Dr. Hummer has made basically puts the conventional medicine out of business. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being guests today, Dr. Metzger, Bellevue, Washington, Danny Carroll in Bombay, India. This has been a wonderful conversation. It has been a joy. And for those of you that are watching this program, at the end, in the credits, you are going to find that there will be the contact information relative to both of these gentlemen that you will be able to reach. I'm so delighted that we've been able to share this with you. I hope you will take the time to check out my radio shows as well as this television show, which we have the opportunity to do once a month. Gentlemen, thank you again for being my guests.
Thank you so much, Donna. It's been
You have been listening to the Donna Seebo Show Special Editions. The audio version of this program will also be heard on the Donna Seebo Show radio broadcast. We are delighted you were able to join us and invite you to share this programming with your friends and family. Have a rich and fulfilling life.